Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
Colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
we become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem.
Ensure,
We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over our cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire We had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me, and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show. But if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hey, boys and girls, welcome into Redacted, all you two-gendered people out there. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. Tonight, we're going to look at a couple of different media-related pieces. Specifically, we're going to look at CNN censoring their Gaza coverage and admitting that, yeah, they have to run some things up the flagpole before they can actually allow it to be broadcast, and we'll talk about that.
Why that war and not other wars? For instance, why don't they ask Russia how they're going to cover the Ukraine war?
Mr. Putin, can you sign off on our coverage here in the Ukraine war, and we'll allow it to be broadcast?
We're also going to talk about invasion of New York City, how students at a high school are being asked to go virtual, because that school now is being used to house undocumented immigrants. What's happening? Also, is Sweden preparing for war? Yeah, they are. And Nikki Haley says that Poland is next. Putin is going to attack Poland and the Baltics. That's why we need to supply as much money and weapons as we can to Ukraine. And this afternoon, President Putin of Russia flew to the United States border. First visit ever. Right up against the United States border that had a lot of folks in America going, what is he doing in the Arctic? Why is Mr. Putin going to the Arctic? What's happening here? All of that and more as Redacted starts right now. Yeah, so Putin, apparently, according to Nikki Haley, Putin is launching massive attacks. Poland and the Baltics ready to be destroyed. He's going to invade these areas next unless we supply money and weapons to Ukraine to make sure that that doesn't happen. So, yeah, we're on the verge of something big in the Baltics, according to Nikki Haley and these warmongers. We'll get to the heart of all of that. We do have a daily newsletter. Right, I'll tell you about that. You can find it at redacted.inc. A lot of times when we talk about these stories, we give you a heads up in the newsletter. It comes out in the earlier morning, and the show comes out in the afternoon. So it's totally free. You just go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then click the authentication email. And it is not behind any kind of paywalls. There's no level of subscription that we ask you to upgrade to. Totally free. Maybe sometimes we link you to something that's behind someone else's paywall, but we are not asking you for money. So if you ever get a Redacted newsletter asking you for money, that's not it. This is a free newsletter. It's meant to keep you informed, keep you slightly entertained, perhaps, and keep you ready to be on the show later in the afternoon. So redacted.inc, and we try really hard to make sure that you have original links to all the sources that we talk about so that you can form your own opinion about the news. We have no agenda here other than just to be good, studious
citizens of the world.
That's right. Thinkers and readers, and learning about what's going on in this crazy world and navigating it together. And we look at all sources. We look at all different sources from all different angles and really try to navigate all of this clown world together. I see a lot of great people here in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from tonight. Drop it in the chat here. I saw Jody Brooks says hi to the Redacted team and everyone in the chat. Hope everyone is doing well today. Love your Real News channel, Jody from the United States. Hey, Jody, good to see you. Someone keeps asking about challenge coins. Mark Lafitte, I want to know what these challenge coins are, because I asked our team last night. I saw Mark was asking, Mick Lafitte was saying, we need redacted challenge coins. What is a challenge coin?
I don't know.
Like, I played a lot of tabletop games growing up, you know,
Yeah.
and with dice and stuff like that. And I've never heard of, I don't know what challenge coins are.
I don't either, but someone on Rumble says it looks like I have a 5 head today, so we can't give every comment.
You have a 5 head?
That just means because I pulled my bangs over. That's okay. I do have a
We're
5.
human beings, by the way. Yeah. So if you do
You
subscribe,
can't hurt my feelings with that kind of stuff.
we have
Go
thick
ahead.
skin. We have thick
Say
skin.
what
We
you
don't
want.
care. If you do subscribe, though, while we're live, your name will pop up here on the big screen, like Cool Cats Chris X. Hey, Cool Cats just joined the rebellion, so thank you, Cool Cats, for joining us and subscribing. Go ahead, David.
I looked up what a challenge coin is. A challenge coin is a small coin or medallion bearing an organization's insignia or emblem and carried by the organization's members.
Oh, okay. Because
Kind of like Dumbledore's army.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
So I was thinking, like, you know, when we would have members of Congress on the show, like, I don't know, members of Congress would come into the studio and they would say, you know, hey, Clayton, thanks for having me on the show. And they'd give me like a House of Representatives coin, right?
Okay.
Sometimes. So maybe that's what that is. Or members of the military, like generals, and they'd come and they'd give me like a coin. Members of the military. Maybe that's what that is, a challenge coin.
But in the 5th Harry Potter book,
think
they use they'd use Dumbledore's army to communicate with each other. So when they do something on the coin, if it lights up or makes an insignia, they know to go and meet in the room of requirement. So maybe it's like a secret thing like that, and I'm into it.
Yeah,
I'll just have to figure out how to do it.
I just want it to be something that I can collect, and when I get enough of them, like I can then like challenge Clayton for his position as host, and then I'm like, I challenge you, and I slap my coin down on the table. And
yeah, I would love to know what they are.
But then you have to sit on camera, Philip.
Yeah, you'd have to turn a camera on.
Yeah.
Or maybe he'd just do a radio show.
The show would look totally different at that point. It would look totally different.
All right, let's get to the news, shall we? We've got a lot to get to tonight. War is coming to Scandinavia. Get ready, folks. Sweden is preparing for war against Russia. Sweden had been, of course, a neutral country. Remember when Sweden was a neutral country? For hundreds of years. And nearly 2 centuries, Sweden has been a neutral country. And now you can throw that out the window, thanks to the expansion of NATO, of course, which will lead to a direct conflict with Russia. Putin has warned against it, saying they will not allow it. But NATO continues to want to push the boundaries and test it. I mean, how many of you guys watching right now think that Putin is bluffing? Like, Putin is bluffing with this idea? We will not allow NATO to move up to our back door. We're not going to allow it to happen. It's against our national security. It violates our national security. That's what he said. That's what most of the members of the Russian Federation have said. Do you think he's bluffing?
I mean, look what we did. What we did with Cuba. Like, we wouldn't allow that. We wouldn't allow any other country anywhere near, like Mexico or Cuba or Canada.
No, we just let them. We let thousands of them just come across our borders now. But yeah, but it's like the military. Yeah, we can't have missiles in Cuba because it violates the Monroe Doctrine, our own document, by the way. So the Swedes have been told to prepare for war. I'm just going to read verbatim here, quoting this piece now. In a speech on Sunday, Sweden's foreign minister Tobias Billström said his country's expected membership in NATO is the biggest change in Swedish security policy in more than 200 years. Billström warned that Russia will constitute a serious threat to the security of Sweden. So maybe you don't join NATO then.
What do they think they're going to get out of that? It's just a bill. It's a big bill. It's like a homeowners association that never goes away.
Right. So you got to funnel money and weapons into whatever boondoggle NATO wants you to do around the world. You know, we need you now. We need you to throw a few $1 billion into the coffers. It's like, you know what it is? It's like a pyramid scheme.
because they just happen to keep add members to their pyramid scheme.
Yeah, totally.
Right? It's like one of those, I'm trying to think of one of those pyramid schemes. Like
Herbalife.
Yeah, like Herbalife or
Mary Kay.
Is Mary, well, Mary Kay's not a pyramid scheme.
It is.
Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to like keep adding new people.
Yes.
But then they monthly buy lipstick from you.
Yes. But you have to get more reps.
A pyramid. In the real definition of pyramid scheme, it's not one, because a pyramid scheme is like the person on top makes all the money. It's completely different. It's not the same.
How do you know about Mary Kay?
Because that's where he gets his face cream.
Well, because I did MLM for many years.
Okay.
So
yeah. So no, I didn't think that one fell to the level of it, because you have normal. Anyway, my point is that NATO is a pyramid. Is it not like a pyramid scheme? It feels like it at this point.
Well, and think about this. Why would you go from being a completely neutral country that nobody wants to mess with, you're just fine, everything's going great? Is it because you want American money, and all of a sudden you're going to put yourself in danger and then have to like put your soldiers in harm's way if the United States is like, hey, we're going to go attack Russia now for no reason. Let's go.
Yeah, I can't follow that rationale. I don't know. You're right. Good point.
It's the security measure. Like, they feel like they need the security. Those security. Russia is going to now invade Sweden. No. Russia would attack Sweden if you become a member of NATO. I mean, I'm not saying
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like the provocation is Sweden joining NATO. So how can you need NATO to protect you from Russia when the provocation is joining NATO? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It makes no sense. So Billstrom warned that Russia will constitute a serious threat to the security of Sweden and Europe, he said, and for the foreseeable future. He added that Stockholm must be realistic and assume and be prepared for a drawn-out confrontation. Echoing the sentiment, Defense Minister Pal Johnson said war can also come to us, claiming that Ukraine is acting as Europe's shield at the moment in conflict with Russia. See, that's how they see Ukraine. And that's what members of U.S. Congress, by the way, feel about Ukraine as well, like as a shield. Like, we'll use all of the Ukrainians to die to shield the rest of Europe from Russia. The madness.
And a shield they won't even allow into NATO.
Right. Yeah, isn't that funny?
Right.
It's like the toxic. Yeah, go ahead.
And if you don't see Ukraine as a template, as a warning template, are you not paying attention? Who looks at what's happening to Ukraine and thinks, that looks fun, let's do that too?
Yeah, let's follow in their footsteps. And we're going to get to some horrible stuff in Ukraine in just a moment here. I'm going to show you the latest developments there. We just got a nice super chat from Sweden. Regards from stupid Sweden. Mike, I don't know how you say your name. Your screen name is like RR Sajenka or something. But regards from stupid Sweden. Putin doesn't care for us. We are like a drop in the sea for him. Well, we'll see. I mean, if maybe right now, become a member of NATO and start moving weapons onto the back door of Russia and then see what happens. Russia's telling us what's going to happen. So do you call their bluff? So again, Moscow has stated that NATO's continuing expansion towards Russia's western borders, as well as the refusal to rule out Ukrainian membership in the future, are among the key causes of the ongoing conflict. Russia sees NATO as a threat to national security. And look, this has been foretold. Watch my deep interview with Michael Horn, where we went over the long history and the prophecies. He wrote about this in 2017 on his website. 2017, the coming war in Scandinavia, and lays out exactly what's going to happen. You should read it. You should watch my interview with Michael Horn. It's pretty darn eye-opening. And all of this is now coming to pass. And we can sort of sit back and say, we didn't know this was coming. We didn't see it coming. We did see it coming. The NATO expansion was foretold. And this provocation with Russia is foretold. Nikki Haley, of course, the warmonger Nikki Haley, is calling for direct confrontation. She absolutely is a member of the deep state, the military-industrial complex. They love her. You're certainly seeing all of these news articles now on, all across NPR and all, the rise of Nikki Haley. How is she rising? She's only rising because the deep state and the military-industrial complex wants her to become president because she is their mouthpiece for war. Listen to her last night on how Poland is next. Poland and the Baltics. Putin is going to attack Poland and the Baltics.
Russia said once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries. That puts America at war. This is about preventing war. It's always been about preventing war. My husband is a combat veteran. He's deployed now. The last thing I want him or any of his military brothers and sisters to do is to go to war. But to avoid going to war, you have to prevent it. And just to support Ukraine, it only costs 3.5% of our defense budget. That's it. The Europeans have paid more, and they should. It's in their neighborhood. But this is about preventing war. And we have to make sure that we do everything we can to keep Americans safe and to keep our national security safe.
Yeah. She's a liar. She's lying. That's a lie.
Wait a minute. Are you kidding me? Really?
When did Russia say that they wanted Poland next? When did Russia even say that it wanted all of Ukraine? Russia didn't. Russia was asked to come in from the special military operation only into the regions that Ukraine had been bombing. They were asked by the mayors of those regions to please come in and help us because Ukraine won't stop attacking us as civilians. And they did. Russia never expressed interest for holding on to Ukraine.
How dare you speak badly about
even Google Bard, which
Nicola.
likes to argue with me all the time, acknowledges that Russia has never expressly said, which is totally biased. Philip, were you going to say something? I'm sorry. I was screaming about all those lies.
That was me. The United States is the only country that prevents war with war.
Right.
Yeah, that's our motto. We prevent war by bringing war to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
But
she's an absolute liar.
That's a lie.
And the idea, of course, she says that her husband is deployed. And I absolutely wouldn't want us to go to war because, my husband, I don't want him to die. So the way that we do this, though, that we prevent war by bringing more weapons to the table. It has never worked for the United States. Ever. What the hell is she talking about? Go ahead, Philip.
Oh, sorry. I think that we really need to return to those days where the people that pushed for war had to go fight in it.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much these people would be screaming for war. If okay, you want to continue this war in Ukraine, you're on the front lines. Go do it.
Right. Yeah. Or if the president you voted for brings you to war, you would vote very differently, don't you think?
Yeah. Hans Starr says, Redacted is wrong. Russia wanted a land bridge to Crimea. Russia,
okay. Study the Crimean annexation because, again, Russia didn't go in specifically. They were asked to protect from them.
And also read the Minsk agreements, read the Minsk Accords, and understand who was upholding their side of the Minsk Accords, by the way, and who totally balked and used it as a scam. Angela Merkel admitted later they had no intention of supporting the Minsk agreements.
I just want to know who told you that Russia wanted a land bridge to Crimea. And who told you the intentions? I'm just curious. Where did you find that? It must have been a headline.
Yeah.
Not a real vote.
Can you please send us the NPR article where you read that?
David,
Ukraine blew up their own bridge, and blamed Russia. Remember that?
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, but hey, I'll call you out, and great. Thank you for your opinion on that, but that's not accurate. I mean, we'll have a discussion about it, but it's not accurate. So Sweden is preparing for war. Nikki Haley is saying that, Putin wants to invade Poland, wants to invade the Baltics, and that's his intention. He wants to then go all the way into the United States and take over Canada and the U.S., and that's really what's happening. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth if you're paying attention. But meanwhile, another country which is faltering, and we now got confirmation, Germany, a country that, as by all accounts, was the largest economy in Europe, is now really, really struggling. Today, Bloomberg acknowledging that Germany has now entered a recession. Yes. Imagine that. Production declined from October, led by capital goods, intermediate goods. Statistics Office said on Tuesday, this is the 6th consecutive drop. Manufacturing continues to decline. See, that's what happens when your allies blow up your Nord Stream pipeline and your energy resources that you're relying on from Russia. You turn off your nuclear power plants, and then you have to fire up coal-powered plants again, and you're trying to rely on just solar and wind, and you're also shutting down your manufacturing base. So your electronics manufacturing, your vehicle manufacturing, it's all declining in Germany. But that's not stopping Olaf Scholz today from, even though when you get these bad economic numbers, and this is the same thing with Biden, it's absolutely mental. They are mental patients.
Olaf Scholz telling the EU, you guys need to really get serious about Ukraine. He's totally out of touch. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has appealed to other EU member states to step up their military assistance to Ukraine, noting that his own country ranks second only to the United States in terms of weapons shipments to Kiev.
Maybe you should go outside and look at the protests and see how your people feel about that.
They don't want war.
They're asking for your attention.
The farmers are standing out in the freezing cold in Berlin right now, and they're telling you they do not want war or money going to war. They want money to help their own country in Germany. You wouldn't have to slash subsidies for farmers because you're sending money to Ukraine. I mean, they're totally out of touch. Literally on the same day you get this report about a recession, Olaf Scholz is telling we need to double down on sending more money and weapons to Ukraine. It's absolute madness. So according to reports out today, Ukraine is now actively going and stepping up their conscription efforts. They're stopping public transport, stopping buses, going on to public buses now and trying to find people who are on these buses. Are you on public transport trying to get trying to take the bus? We're just stopping you. We're going to do checks right now. Walk in. There we go. We're going to check and see if there's any young men on this bus. Anybody wearing an old man mask on here? And we're going to take you to the front lines and throw you right into the meat grinder.
I mean, this is something that the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times are both admitting are happening now. This is something that people were called crazy and conspiracy theorists and Putin apologists for talking about for months and months. Now the mainstream media is finally admitting it. Way to catch up. In the meantime, people have been dragged into wars they are not prepared for. They are not trained for.
No, and they don't have the munitions. They don't have the weapons for it. And they're receiving no training at all. These people do not want to be a part of this. And meanwhile, you're getting Ukrainian oligarchs, we learned today, are buying multi-million-dollar mansions in other countries, multi-million-dollar mansions in Germany, as reported today. So these same guys that are demanding these young men and they're dragging people off of buses to go fight, why are they buying mansions in other countries? Why don't they go fight? Now, according to reports today, Ukraine has ordered over 50,000 uniforms for women to fight. And they're putting out nice propaganda pieces so you can see what it looks like to be a woman fighting in Ukraine. You can see the nice garb. This is what you'll get, ladies, in Ukraine. You don't go to nightclubs anymore. All the men have died. So,
flattering.
So it's all, there's no men left in Ukraine. So if you maybe want to meet a woman now, that's your only choice. And the best way to do that is to meet a woman on the front lines. So we're going to share these different outfits. And this report today.
They must be out of shoestrings and boots. She's wearing tennis shoes with no strings in it.
Oh, I missed that. See, that's what women always notice the shoes.
David's not a woman.
Oh, that's right. But he always notices women's fashion.
He does. He likes
He's very aware of women's fashion.
Yeah, he always compliments me when I wear a beret. And I'm like, how do you know the word beret?
But I never noticed that. I never noticed the shoes. So David was very keen on seeing those shoes there in the snow. Yeah. It is true. And so this report out today, a Ukrainian woman published this on social media saying she's pregnant and she received a conscription letter from the government of Ukraine to go and fight. So she has to report for duty now. Listen.
Друзі, це просто якийсь жах. Боже, який жах. Хоронять бідних людей. Я не можу, коли це все закінчиться.
Do you think they just don't know that she's pregnant?
I mean, you hope. I mean, you hope to give them the office the benefit of the doubt, right? That she could send a letter and say, "I'm pregnant. I'm sorry." Then they'll probably make her come in and prove it.
Like jury duty.
Yeah, but here's more women showing off their new Ukrainian women's fashions, getting ready for war. So this is what they'll be sending out. This is part of the propaganda that's being shared on social media. Women go fight in Ukraine because the men are all gone. And this is what it looks like now in Ukraine. So, yeah, Putin, by the way, today showed up in the Arctic right on the United States border for the very first time. And it was pretty interesting to watch. And this is his first trip there. It's incredibly difficult to get there, but literally right on the United States border. And of course, there's a lot of connections to what Russia is doing right now in the Arctic, and the U.S. trying to ramp up efforts right now to try to build out new icebreaker ships because we are losing the race for the Arctic.
And that passageway, of course, if the Red Sea is disrupted, the Arctic passageway right now is the new trade route.
Yes.
And China and Russia are doubling down on their efforts to move in that direction. So President Putin showing up in the Arctic to see what's going to happen there. And right on the Alaska border was President Putin today. So I'm sure there was like Americans sitting at those bases going like, what's going on here? Why is the office of the president of Russia flying right to the American border in Alaska? Let us know your thoughts on all of this. We'll continue to watch what happens with Nikki Haley and Poland, and if Poland's about to be invaded. But I'm very curious on the Scandinavian piece of this. And a lot of people in the chat were saying, yes, if you read the Billy Meyer stuff, if you go down and you study this, this has been foretold. This has been written about and documented. And now it's starting to come to... So don't be shocked when there is a war in Scandinavia and the pushing of NATO and NATO expansion right up to Russia's back door is the catalyst for all of this.
All right, well, we have more news to get to. We're going to talk about an invasion of New York City high schools when students are asked to go virtual learning because their high school is now being used to house undocumented immigrants. How would you feel about paying your property taxes? After that happened, we're going to show you images. It will make your jaw drop. We're also going to talk about how CNN is filtering their coverage of the war in Gaza through the IDF. Of course they are. And we're going to talk about defending the National Guard, how a new bill in New Hampshire would prevent the National Guard from being called up to any wars unless Congress declares war. Because guess what? Congress just keeps kind of skipping that part. And risking American lives. And one veteran has had enough of it. We're going to talk to him coming up here in the show. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Factor, because you can get started on your resolutions with Factor so you're ready for the new year. Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success in this new year. So skip the grocery stores, prep work, and cooking fatigue. Instead, get chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals delivered right to your door with over 35 meals to choose from per week, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, veggie, or whatever it is that's your dietary preference, plus over 55 weekly add-ins. You'll have tons of nutritious and flavorful options to kickstart your resolutions. And right now, Factor offers also loads of snack options like breakfasts, smoothies, juices, snacks, and more to keep you going no matter what's on your schedule. So skip the overpriced takeout trap. Factor is cheaper and more delicious than takeout. You can get chef-crafted restaurant quality meals delivered right to your door. Plus, you don't have that, like, I don't know, where do you want to order from? What about you?
That's the worst. Do you want Indian food?
Well, let's order out. Okay, what do you want?
No, the worst part is that
I don't know.
We do that when we're hungry, right?
Yeah.
So we're already at the stage of being hungry.
Right.
And then we're like, she's like, I want sushi. I'm like, I don't want sushi. That to me is like a snack. You know, I want like, I don't know, I want Indian food or I want something heavy.
Right.
You know?
It's better when there's already a prepared meal and you know it's healthy, right?
Yeah.
So then you don't go through that and then you sit and wait for the delivery person and you track the Uber. Anyway. You know what I'm talking about. So head on over to factormeals.com/redacted50 and use code redacted50 to get 50% off. That's code redacted50 at factormeals.com/redacted50 for your 50% off.
Thanks for our super chats. Russian Soul is the screen name. Left us a $20 super chat. Says, I hope one day our people will find a way to live in peace. Vivek Ramaswamy appears to be the only hope on this side. They killed Kennedy. We have liberated Europe from fascism, but they will never forgive us for it, Zukov said. So thank you for that super chat.
There was another from Norway. Person, super chat, thank you, said, I live in Norway. Russia's never attacked us. We should maybe try and live in peace. I like that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah, good idea.
Finland is not learning that lesson, so we'll see. Well,
Right.
Scandinavian war and the war over the Arctic is coming soon to a war theater near you.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you for your comments very much. Well, a New York City high school is suffering from an invasion of immigrants. As students were informed, they will have to go to virtual learning today because the school was used to house undocumented migrants. The migrants had been living in a tent-like shelter, but they couldn't stay there because of severe East Coast storms. Politicians are saying, we told you that this would not work. You couldn't put people in tents as a permanent solution. We're going to show you this video of the migrants in the schools and the tents where they were living. But first, don't worry about it, though, because AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the representative from New York, she's got a solution, and she's going to tell you how to feel about this. So don't get yourself riled up. Let her explain it to you.
From all parts of the political spectrum, one of the biggest issues that we have when it comes to immigration is the fact that we have an undocumented population. Now, you can fix that by trying to build a wall, or you can fix that by trying to document people and create a path to citizenship. And
let's give it up, AOC.
We'll have folks that might say, look at these systems, you know, that our shelter system has weight and things like that. But one of the reasons that our public systems experience weight is because people don't have a documented and reliable path to work and sustain themselves, just like all of our ancestors did, and our grandparents and great-grandparents.
Okay. I love how empowered she looks after she's applauded for saying document them. Like, yeah, I really know how to tell them. They love me. I have all the answers.
They come here with no means at all, okay? They don't have a job. They come here with no means to...
Or skills.
And they don't have a way to provide for the people they're bringing with them.
Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know if they have skills or not.
We don't know if they have skills.
Yeah.
Maybe they have hard skills. Maybe they know carpentry. Maybe they know farming. We don't know. The point is, though, they don't have any means to support themselves, right?
Right.
So they're coming here, and then they're also bringing people with them that they can't support. So then her solution is just document them, get them into the system,
and then they'll get jobs and take care of themselves.
And then suddenly they're going to just get full-time jobs and take care of themselves and be living, breathing members of society and contributing members of society.
Just like that.
Just like that. Never mind the fact that all of the health services and everything else that they're relying on in the United States is being sapped and tapped to provide for these individuals. When the people who are citizens, who are working a day job and are providing for their families and are paying taxes, by the way, and providing taxes for their police departments and fire departments, they are already paying into this system in a big way. And now those people are being pushed out and marginalized as a result of this.
Absolutely. And now so are our children. I feel kind of bad that I said they're not skilled. I didn't mean that. I don't know how skilled these people are, right? We're not really being told why they're coming or what they're running from or anything like that. And of course, anybody can learn.
Well, the point is we don't know anything about them. So they're being brought in. I mean, maybe they're all amazing
software engineers.
Maybe they're all excellent with Excel spreadsheets. Maybe they are. We have no idea.
Yes.
Because we don't know where they are. Once they come in, we lose them. We have no tracking of them. We don't know where they are.
Yeah, and I'm all for people having upward mobility. Absolutely, right? But I wonder in the situation that we're in right now, and what she had said is that people will say, well, our shelters are burgeoning and we don't have the resources and this and that. Well, we don't right now. So how would the people that you're about to see on your screen having ID cards, driver's licenses, how would that help right now when kids can't go to school? So here is an image. This is a video. Too many migrants and nowhere to live. And so therefore kids can't go to school. Watch this video of a mother watching immigrants take over the school that her kids cannot go to tomorrow, which is today. This video was last night, and saying, okay, you're going to be here, so my kids cannot now.
How do you feel? How do you feel? Makes you feel good? I hope it makes you feel really good. How does it feel that you kicked all the kids out of school tomorrow? How does it feel? Do you feel good? I hope you feel good. I hope you all sleep really well tonight.
Can you imagine?
Why are you yelling?
No, I'd be pissed.
Why are you yelling at them?
I have a right to. That's why. That's why. Because I'm an aggravated mother. That's why.
Why are you yelling at them? What an idiot question that is. My kids can't go to school tomorrow.
Take all the kids out to sleep here tonight, huh? How long you staying?
it's upsetting, obviously. And you see those people and you think, well, I don't want them to have nowhere to go. I don't want those babies that they're walking in to sleep in a tent that's going to collapse on them and freeze all night. Nobody wants that, right? We're not blaming necessarily them. We're wondering why our government is allowing this and giving us no information. Here is the migrant tent that they had been being housed in. But the severe weather raised concerns that the tent could collapse overnight. Now, here's a statement from State Assemblyman Tom Sullivan. He says that the federal government did not listen to objections that they raised over the summer when these tents went up in the first place. Local officials warned them this was a bad idea, but they didn't listen. And now he's calling it a slap in the face to working families. Because not only were those working families' tax dollars supporting those people in the tent, now they're getting kicked out of their infrastructure that AOC says will be just fine if those people have IDs and can get jobs, and then they'll move themselves out of there. And of course, no one wants that. No one wants these poor, powerless people in a collapsed tent during a storm. But now look, they're in a gym. This is Mayor Eric Adams visiting as they sort of cozied up there. Nor do we want them to live on a gym floor where your kids are supposed to be doing PE tomorrow.
Right. So now the kids are kicked out of school because they've got thousands of illegal immigrants that are sleeping on the school floors. And these kids now have to. Now that mom's angry. She probably goes to work, right? Or maybe she doesn't. I don't know. And her kids, which would normally go to school, she'd be able to take them to school and then go off to her job. Now she's got to maybe stay home. She can't work or go to the office because now her kids are home from school. Because what, they're closing their school and now these kids have to go to virtual? Didn't we learn our lesson about virtual learning, by the way?
Well, not just on the kids, which, yes, it's awful, but on the families. Having kids home now disproportionately inconveniences the mother, who may be a work from home or a stay-at-home mom, and then now you're put upon extra, right? And so why? We didn't sign up for this, and we're not getting any answers. We're not getting an answer of like, what is this going to do to our society? Am I in or am I not? You're not being asked to buy into anything, but just go along with it. And it doesn't look like this is temporary because watch this footage here of workers bringing in cots and food supplies.
Oh, this is cots. This is beds they're bringing in.
Where's the money coming from? Who's bringing these beds in? Who's supplying this?
Right, here they tell her, you can't film this. Listen for that.
Why not? Why not? I gotta see where my tax dollars are going.
I like how she pushes back. They're like, you can't film this. And she's like, why not?
She's like, I'm a New Yorker. You don't tell me I can't film something.
Yeah.
Grim in our chat, Grim on our team says, wait a minute, we don't have a path to citizenship, to what AOC. Yeah, we have a path to
we do.
We have a path to citizenship. Like it's worked for hundreds of years. Like what's the big deal? Now suddenly we can't have people following that. We just open up our borders and then we lose them inside the United States. You have a councilwoman in New York admitting the reason we need them here in the first place, of course, is because I need new voters.
Well, look, the United States decides which people get to come in on which passports and apply for citizenship and how long it takes those types of people. We have almost a points-based system, right? So if you have a passport from some African country, it's much harder to get to the United States, get a work permit, and, get on a path to citizenship than it is to say if you came from Norway or Sweden, because we have agreements with the European Union and Schengen about who comes and goes. So if we want to fast track those people, we have to change those rules. We just have to say, okay, change those rules, and then we're going to do it this way. But we have to agree to that, which we have not, right?
Right.
And so to flood the country with people and not give us answers and ask us to pay for it, we're owed some answers. It's not that I don't think that most of us lack empathy for those families because they're clearly running from something awful, but we also don't lack empathy from the families that are now having to support it, right? Which is all of us.
I sort of chuckle because we sort of have to sit here and justify that we have empathy of course, when you see like a little child getting off of a bus at 2 a.m, going to sleep on a floor,
you would be, you wouldn't be hooked up correctly if you didn't find that touching and awful. But let's rewind the clock a little bit. How did they get here in the first place? We bombed their frickin' country. That's why they're here. We've bombed and displaced their countries. So they're leaving Somalia after we went in and killed Gaddafi. What did Gaddafi warn about? Of course, he talked specifically about the flood of migrants that were going to pour throughout Europe with the death of with him being killed. And that's exactly what happened to Europe. That's exactly what's happened in the United States. When you destabilize these countries with the United States military and they flood your borders, this is what happens. So yes, we have empathy, but we should stop the bleeding beforehand. We should stop it where it starts, which is the invasion of these countries.
Right.
And not just the invasions, but sanctions that we put on them. We put sanctions on, and these people can't get medications, they can't get food, they can't get things that they really need. So
right.
We don't even need to drop bombs.
Yeah, that's a great point. What is it? Sanctions of mass destruction? Mm-hmm. So no wonder they want to leave those countries. And then we open our doors so they can flood right in great replacement and take over our country.
Right. So what happens then when there are no more schools that the city can reach in and use? What happens then when there are no more hotels or elderly people's homes that they can use? Well, this is what's happening in Massachusetts. Watch.
Thanks, Catherine. The state's shelters are reaching capacity, and now the governor is asking residents to help by opening their doors. That was part of Governor Maura Healey's announcement, as she's also looking for help from the federal government. Boston 25 News reporter Kelly Sullivan is live at the State House this morning, where the governor called this a crisis situation. Kelly.
Yeah, that's right, Ray. And so the governor said that there's anywhere between 10 to 30 migrant families coming into Massachusetts a day. And there's about 40 hotels across the state that are helping to house the migrant families. So now the governor is asking help not only from the federal government, but also from you. Governor Maura Healey said yesterday that close to 5,600 families are currently housed in the state's emergency shelter system. That number is 80% higher than 1 year ago. Massachusetts is the only state in the country with a right to shelter law, which guarantees homeless families access to emergency shelter. She says Massachusetts has been spending around $45 million a month to help assist these families. Now, the situation is so bad, the Healey administration is now asking people to open their homes and businesses to help people in need.
If you have an extra room or suite in your home, please consider hosting a family. Safe housing and shelter is our most pressing need. Become a sponsor family.
Governor Healey is hoping the emergency declaration will provide more federal funding and expedite work permits for immigrants. New York State has also declared a state of emergency, as well as the cities of Chicago, El Paso, and Washington, D.C. So the governor's administration also announced yesterday that it has created a migrant families relief fund, and so that is a coordinated effort with the local United Way to help raise private donations. For now, reporting live from the State House, Kelly Sullivan for your local station, Boston 25 News.
All right,
yeah. So and all of those are liberal. All of those are liberal cities, liberal states with terrible liberal politicians that have run those areas into the ground.
Right. So not only are your tax dollars going into this, but they're asking you for more, not just private donations. So more money, please, but also your house. So open up your guest room. Maybe the guest house out back,
what about
the mother-in-law suite.
What about that liberal governor? Open up the gubernatorial mansion.
Mm-hmm. Could do that.
Instead of getting the kids out of the school.
Probably in there.
Yeah, I mean, that thing's probably huge. Instead of kicking kids out of the school, making them sleep in, the kids have to go to virtual schooling, open up the governor's mansion, the liberal governor's mansion, and let them sleep there.
Yeah, I wonder,
you wouldn't even have to take the plastic off the couch. Like, let them sleep on the plastic.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you get a tax credit if you do that? They're not offering you anything in return. Usually the government gives you some kind of incentives.
For housing or something.
Yeah, well, if I house a migrant.
No. The Biden administration will give you a tax credit for putting solar panels in your house. Mm-hmm. But if you want to house migrants, no, they won't do anything for that. They'll give you.
She pointed out right at the end there that they were setting up private donation.
Right.
Ability to send private donations, which tells me that they're probably not getting anything from the city or state.
Yeah. I mean, I want something like tax credit or something, but no, you take them in and you feed them.
NIMBY.
We're not going to give you. It is. Yeah. It's like a YIMBY, right? Because a NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. It's for people who say they want to, they want, I don't know.
I want wind farms, but not in my
not in their backyard.
Right.
And that's why the wind farms are never built within like a 20-mile radius of Starbucks, because they know that people go to Starbucks and don't want to see wind farms. And so these are, so the NIMBYs are like, they want it, but not in their backyard. And then there's the YIMBYs, who are the yes in my backyard. So AOC, open up your, high-rise apartment. If that's how you feel, it should be those people doing that. I mean, again, if you give me a reason, an idea of why this is happening and what's the goal and how we're going to stop it, then I'm listening. But until you say that, we just have no option but to be outraged. So let us know what you think of that.
Yeah. We've got more news to get to here on what is today, Wednesday?
It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. We're going to talk about CNN. And you want to know how the mainstream media has just lost all credibility? Look no further than our next story. We're going to dive deeply into this, which is unbelievable. We're also going to look at, hey, here's an idea. Shouldn't Congress have to authorize going to war? Remember when that was a thing, when Congress had to approve that we would go to war? That's gone out the window. But one veteran is standing up saying that needs to change. And we're going to talk to that veteran on our show in just moments. But first,
we're going to tell you about our friends over at BioOptimizers, because if your New Year's resolution was to focus on your well-being, then of course, that has to mean also your sleep. So if you want to do just one thing to improve your sleep and overall well-being, there is a mineral that will help you. We're talking about magnesium. Actually, Magnesium Breakthrough by BioOptimizers is optimized to help you to absorb magnesium better so that you can rest better. There are 7 different forms of magnesium in this supplement that are involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. So pretty much every function in your body gets upgraded when you take magnesium, from the quality of your sleep to your brain function, from metabolism to stress levels. And let's face it, even if your 2024 resolution is not to focus on your health, how are you really going to achieve your goals without quality sleep and stress management support? Magnesium is great to help you relax, go to sleep, and it doesn't give you any kind of hangover feeling that maybe a Tylenol PM or anything else that you might take over the counter might do. So do yourself a favor and make Magnesium Breakthrough part of your daily routine this year so that you can get the vitality you need to conquer your dreams. Go right now to biooptimizers.com/redacted. Use our promo code redacted to get 10% off any order. That's biooptimizers.com/redacted.
And I want to read this lovely super chat from Mango King. Thank you for your kind super chat here, Mango King, a $300 super chat. This is a losing war, he writes. You all fail to understand that the globalists are behind NATO, and this war is just a means to reduce population, push immigrants into other countries. We're losing because we're not even aware that there's a war going on. Meanwhile, the enemy, aka the globalists, have been attacking us. Yeah, I mean, I think, hopefully people understand that connection, right? The idea that globalists are behind NATO, and they absolutely they don't want government boundaries. They don't want nationalism. Right? They want broken down boundaries, and they want a global structure, global infrastructure. And so if you can just open up the borders and allow people to come in from wherever they want, and it doesn't really matter. And that's exactly what they want.
That's a great point.
So thank you, Mango King, for that. We appreciate that. Cadet Mentor is also a new member as well. Nice to see all of you guys. If you do subscribe to the channel, your name will pop up here on the big screen. So we really thank you for your support, whether it's on Rumble or on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for that. All right, let's talk about this. If I can pull my notes up here in a second. Kind of lost here in a second. Well, if you needed any more confirmation that the mainstream media is corrupt, we just got our clearest indication yet. CNN is now admitting that they have to get approval from Israel before they run any news pieces about the war in Gaza. Can you imagine that? So CNN, which purports to be an independent news organization, right, the most trusted name in news, has to run things up the flagpole before broadcast. So a CNN whistleblower has come forward admitting to The Intercept that CNN has a long-time relationship with the Censor Bureau in Jerusalem. So let's just go through this piece. And you can see here, CNN runs Gaza coverage past Jerusalem team operating under shadow of an IDF censor, the Israeli Defense Forces censor. So every single Palestinian-related line for reporting must seek approval from the Jerusalem Bureau, according to the whistleblower. Or what the Bureau, when the Bureau is not staffed, like if they're on vacation, then they have to take it to a few hand-picked by the Bureau and senior management, from which lines are most often edited out with a very specific nuance, the staffer says. So they basically go through and then chop out anything that's not pro-Israel and is, maybe they chop out whatever sort of is pro-Palestinian. So let's go through this. The censor restricts foreign news outlets from reporting on certain subjects of its choosing and outright censors articles or news segments that don't meet their guidelines, according to The Intercept. Other news,
what the heck? What is Israel Pfizer now?
Right.
Bigger than that.
Much bigger.
A little bit
bigger than that. Yeah, they run it all, right? I mean, the policy of running stories about Israel or Palestinians past the Jerusalem Bureau has been in place for years, according to this CNN spokesperson. It is simply down to the fact that there are many unique and complex local nuances that warrant extra scrutiny to make sure our reporting is as precise and accurate as possible. The spokesperson added that CNN does not share news copy with the censor and called the network's interactions with the IDF minimal. This is what a spokesperson said for CNN. So CNN is sort of doing some backpedaling here and is now, trying to put out the fire, so to speak.
I have a bit of a novel idea. Why doesn't CNN send some journalists over there to actually see what's going on? And then they could cross-reference it with what they're being told by Israel and what they're seeing in Gaza.
It would be amazing, actually, if CNN sent journalists, into Gaza, where many of these journalists have been killed. Of course, so many journalists are being killed. One very brave journalist over the past 24 hours has now said, I can't do it anymore. That I'm going to take my family out of here and protect, because so many of these journalists and their families are being shot and killed. And this journalist said, this journalist is in his 30s, and he said, the reason he's leaving, he said, is because I've been sharing this information with the world, and the world is ignoring it, and they're not doing anything. And so I can continue to show you the horrors of what's happening every day here, but no one's doing anything about it. So do I lose my family then?
Right.
So now my son will be killed because I'm continuing to show you what's happening here every day, and no one's doing a goddamn thing about it.
Well, we saw how Shireen Abu Akleh was targeted by the IDF, and so it's extremely dangerous. For anyone, though, who's ever been to journalism school, you know that you're taught, like, journalism 101 is you do not show your story to your sources. You never have to do that. Sometimes you do it if it's like a story about, I don't know, like a fluff piece or whatever, but you don't have to. You do not have to run your story by your sources.
By your sources?
Yeah. If it's so...
Oh, yeah.
You interview someone, like, as a part of a piece about Israel, and then they say, can I read your piece before it goes to press? You don't do that. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might do it if you think it's inconsequential, just to make sure you've got the quote right, or the price on something or whatever, but you really are not supposed to ever do it.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah. In practice, the staff member told The Intercept, the CNN whistleblower told The Intercept, war crime and genocide are taboo words. We're not allowed to write them. Israeli bombings in Gaza will be reported as blasts, attributed to nobody, until the Israeli military weighs in to either accept or deny responsibility. They're labeled as blasts. Quotes and information provided by Israeli army and government officials tend to be approved quickly, while those from Palestinians tend to be heavily scrutinized by the Jerusalem Bureau. Imagine that. Jerusalem Bureau Chief Richard Green announced that it had expanded its review team to include editors outside of Israel now. Oh, okay, so now they've got some extra people outside of Israel, calling the new policy the Jerusalem Second Eyes program. I love it. The expanded review process was ostensibly put in place to bring more expert eyes to CNN's reporting, particularly when the Jerusalem news desk is not staffed. So when the Jerusalem news desk can't approve your copy and your videos that are going to be broadcast on CNN, then they've got some backup people that they've figured out who they are, and they've handpicked these individuals.
One of the things that Ilan Pappé talks about in his books on Israel, and he's an Israeli Jew, and he talks about how it has long since been known that you cannot really criticize Israel and their narrative of the Zionist government. And so a lot of times the way that people do it is through poetry. That's why Palestinians have so much poetry, is because that seems to be the thing that they are able to get away with without being censored by the Israeli government. And another thing that they usually use is theater. But they have historically known that work in Israel is censored, and especially the press. This is true. This has been true for decades.
So then maybe CNN will start doing poetry readings. And that's
If
how
they
they'll
want to.
If they actually wanted to get the truth out.
Right.
They'll start doing poetry. But you'll see commercial breaks now. They'll do like a news piece, and then they'll do like, you know how like CNN does like the little garbage, like a moment of Zen or something like that. They'll do a moment of poetry, and it'll just be like you'll have to sit there and read poetry to figure out what's actually going on.
We're actually trying to get. I
Like
mean, wouldn't
Morse
this be
code
awful?
or something.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and this isn't like, because like we know that there are already state-sponsored media, but what is this? Like a foreign government can just come in and say, hey, you know what? We don't like your coverage, and they just bow down. Like that's horrible.
Beyond horrible.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, well, we know that these massive corporations, these multi-billion-dollar corporations, they don't have their viewers' interests in heart. They have an agenda, of course. They absolutely have an agenda, right? Which is to make money. They have an agenda to make money and spread propaganda. And many times they have cushy relationships, of course, with the intelligence state because they're spreading propaganda. And the intelligence community makes it very cushy for them to do that. Props them up and pays them. Newsroom employees were advised Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. If you look at like how our intelligence agencies and the Israeli intelligence agencies and like their government and our government are so intertwined, I don't even know that you could consider it foreign intervention, because it's like it's domestic. We like our own politicians are in bed with them, so it's just like they're doing it on their own accord. It's not even really foreign influence. Yeah, I mean, it's heavily bought and paid for in Washington, D.C. So yeah, I don't know how much. It's not really foreign at all. It's just they collude on a regular basis. Newsroom employees were advised to, quote, remind our audiences of the immediate cause of this current conflict, CNN says, namely the Hamas attack and mass murder and kidnap of Israeli civilians on October 7th. So basically, anytime they do a story, they have to remind their viewers of October 7th. At least 22,000 people have been confirmed killed in Gaza, 57,000 wounded, and thousands more, of course, are dead. But very little actual Western media organizations are there actually covering this on the ground and providing the actual truth. And now we know that CNN is now funneling this information through a Jerusalem bureau, according to The Intercept, in order to get this reporting out, and it's heavily censored. Are you guys surprised by this at all? But it's really amazing to hear right from these guys.
Well, and to me, it just shows that they're losing the narrative. If they're having to go to this measure to do this, they're losing the narrative. Because if you look at the narrative over on X, it's completely different than anything you'll see on CNN or anything.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why there's such a reliance. I mean, independent media now is so important and so valuable. This is, again, the trust in the media. We did the piece on the trust in the media a few weeks ago, and just how it's absolutely collapsed.
Yeah. It's garbage. And now we know, we already know that they lack curiosity about all kinds of things, such as vaccines, illnesses, medical community, right? All of it. And so now we know why they lack so much interest in discussions of peace. And we've brought you research before that showed that even during the Iraq War, the first Gulf Wars, CNN and other mainstream news channels only used about 10% of their pundits were pro-peace. There's a reason for that. It's not that hard. It's not because they can't book them. They don't want to.
Yeah, they absolutely don't. They have a narrative and an agenda they want. So there you go. Not surprising at all. Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. We've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We're going to talk about why it's a smart idea perhaps to have Congress approve going to war. That way you have a number of elected officials from varying stripes and backgrounds who might totally disagree on launching a war in a foreign country, but we've completely thrown that out. We haven't declared war on a country, I don't think, since, we have the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which wasn't actually a declaration of war. It was, it led to the
since
broader
the 40s.
War. So I was going to say, really, no, I think, it was Korea. I think it technically was the Korean War was the last official U.S. War declaration. I think. Fact check me on that, but just off the top of my head, I think it was Korea, because the Gulf of Tonkin wasn't actual declaration of war per se. You guys understand.
Well, it is supposed to work that way. It's in the Constitution that Congress is supposed to declare war if we're going to risk American lives. But it hasn't been that way in decades. So we have a veteran coming up who is actively trying to make sure that happens. Go ahead, David.
What I'm seeing here is the last formal declaration of war was World War II.
Okay. So it was
formal.
Right.
I don't know if there's a difference between a declaration and a formal declaration.
Yeah, I thought it was Korea, but I guess okay. Yeah, there you go. 1940s, then so World War II. We've had a lot of wars since then, and none of them declared.
Well, a lot of conflicts.
Quote unquote,
conflicts
that we've lost. By the way, that's the thing. All right. Well, we're going to get to that in just a moment, but first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Private Internet Access, because you know that your internet service provider literally knows everything you do online, right? And over 30 million people have signed up for our next sponsor, which is Private Internet Access, PIAVPN.com/redacted. You're going to get 83% discount, 4 months free with Private Internet Access if you use our link, which is right there on your screen. We'll actually have it in the description box below. But, the idea is, would you ever hand over your laptop or your phone to a stranger and ask them to take a look at your browsing history? Probably not. That's a privacy invasion. And yet someone out there knows absolutely everything you do online, whether you like it or not. Your ISP does. So you need to stop them from doing that and looking over your shoulder. And that's what our friends at Private Internet Access will do. That's the world's most transparent VPN provider. A VPN is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. This way, it shields your digital life from the eyes of those that are looking to exploit your private information. Maybe you want to read news sources and other things that are literally available to you in certain countries, but not available to you in other countries because you're being blocked and banned by your ISP from looking at certain data because your government is telling you can't read a certain website. It's unbelievable. And that's that's what the European Union does to people that don't want, the European Union doesn't want you to read certain news sites. So they'll block you from reading news sites. It's unbelievable. But guess what? With a VPN, with our friends over at Private Internet Access, you can now read those news sites and you can get access to it 83% discount, 4 months free. So if you want to enjoy all the benefits of Private Internet Access, now's the time. Head on over to PIAVPN.com/redacted. Get an 83% discount. Seriously, 83%. That's just $2 a month. And you also get 4 months completely free. But you must go to our link there on the screen. We'll have it in the description box below as well. PIAVPN.com/redacted.
New Hampshire just passed a law that prevents the National Guard from being deployed overseas unless Congress declares war. That is not something we normally get anymore. We get endless wars with no actual declaration. So this is huge because it means the Pentagon can't just pull from these forces into wars of fancy without declaring war. And in order to declare war, you need elected representatives to vote on it. This was part of the project of Bring Our Troops Home. This is a group founded by Sergeant Dan McKnight, who served 13 years in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserves, U.S. Army, and the Idaho Army National Guard. So thank you so much for joining me.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
Did I get that right? That now this means that at least in one state, they cannot pull from the National Reserves without a formal declaration. Let me know if I got anything wrong there and why this is so important.
No, that's pretty close. We're a third of the way through. We got through the New Hampshire House of Representatives, and now we go to the New Hampshire Senate. And if it passes there, then it will go to the governor's desk, where Governor Sununu will be forced to make a decision whether to align with the Constitution and the will of the representatives of the people, or to align with the uniparty in Washington, D.C. And we can't wait for that moment.
Okay, so can you just explain for anyone who may not be familiar with the military, the difference between the National Guard and active servicemen, and why you're focusing on this component?
Absolutely. So the National Guard is, it's called the National Guard now, but it actually comes from the Constitution when it refers to the militia. It is the citizen soldiers, citizens that live their everyday lives as tradesmen and doctors and police officers and teachers. But on the weekends, they train in a military capacity to serve their state. They serve their state first, with the governor as the commander-in-chief, and then they serve their country with the president as the commander-in-chief under three situations, three circumstances. If we are under an invasion, they can be federalized to defend the country. If there is a domestic insurrection, they can be federalized to put down the insurrection, and they can be federalized to enforce the laws of the Union. Those are the only three times that the National Guard or the militia can be called into federal service. And the problem is that we don't use that anymore. We send them overseas to fight in undeclared wars, which is none of the three of the constitutionally enumerated purposes of the militia or the National Guard. And so the National Guard is not the reserves. It's a little bit different. The Army Reserve and the Air Force Reserve and the Navy Reserve, the Marine Corps Reserve, those are just like big Army, big Marines, active duty, but they only serve on the weekends. The National Guard is specific that it has dual enlistment. You are in the state militia and the federal military, depending on whose orders you're under.
Okay, so New Hampshire obviously is a small state, so maybe it's a symbolic victory, right? Do you hope that this will move throughout the nation? Why start there?
Absolutely. Well, we started actually in West Virginia. This will be the 10th year that Delegate Pat McGeehan, an Air Force Academy graduate and an Air Force officer, retired, multiple combat tours, he started the bill there about 10 years ago. And we picked it up as an organization in 2019. We got tired of fighting in Washington, D.C. All we want Congress to do is to do their job and declare war. And when we'd go to our congressmen and make that plea to them, they would take pictures with us and shake our hands and thank us for our service and maybe even put a little yellow ribbon on their lapel, but they would never do anything about the foreign policy. And so after Liz Cheney stared us in the eye and said that as long as she was in office, we would never come home from Afghanistan, we decided to take the fight back to a place where we had more leverage. Lift where you stand is kind of a model that we follow. And the state militia, the National Guard, makes up about 50% of the active duty military fighting force. So if we could find a way to limit the ability to access half of their fighting force, we would have a fighting chance to change foreign policy. And by taking that piece off the battlefield, by making them do their job and declare war and put their name on the line before Idaho or New Hampshire or Texas National Guardsmen put their boots on the ground overseas, it puts things back in a right order.
I'm glad you mentioned Liz Cheney, because her father, Dick Cheney, left us with this legacy called unitary executive theory. That was sort of a gift from him. Are you familiar with this?
I am.
And so this, for those of you who are not, holds that the president can override any law, treaty, or even parts of the Constitution to wage war in any way he sees fit, even without an official declaration of war by Congress. This, I believe, was how Obama just launched any war he wanted to without permission. So is this a hindrance to your efforts?
Only to those that don't believe the Constitution. I think the goal of Defend the Guard would be to get this passed and have some sort of a challenge pushed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has already opined on the use of the National Guard under federal service outside of the United States. They have said that the National Guard can and should serve in active capacity in foreign lands for the purposes of training. They purposely left out combat, though. They left it out of their decision because they thought the justices did, that it was pretty clear in the Constitution that the militia can be called forward to enforce the laws of the Union, and a declaration of war becomes the law of the Union. Dick Cheney and his theories are nothing more than that. They've never been tested or challenged. And by the 1/3 of the government, the representatives of the people in the legislature, in Congress, allowing the president to do that, they've abdicated their role and their responsibility to be our representatives and work on our behalf. And there's a handful of congressmen and a handful of senators and it's getting smaller every day, that are standing up to that administrative power that the president's given himself.
So is it your opinion, to boil this down, that if Congress had to vote to authorize these wars and this law stood the test of the Supreme Court, then we would have fewer wars, because without this in place, they're playing pawns with lives? Do I read that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The reason why Congress has abdicated their responsibility to declare war is because they're the ones that have to go home and justify to their constituents why they voted to send their sons and daughters off on some adventure in a third world country in the Middle East. Congress likes the ability for the president to unilaterally decide this. And the greatest, probably non-interventionist constitutional congressman we've had in the last 100 years, Ron Paul, actually put forward a declaration of war resolution before we went into Iraq. He proposed the declaration of war. He said he'd vote against it, his own resolution, but he said this is the way we should be doing it. And Congress basically laughed him out of the chambers. I don't even think it reached a vote. I think it was probably killed by motion. But Congress doesn't want to do that, because are you closer to your congressman or are you closer to the president? Well, the answer is obviously your congressman. The chance of running into your congressman at the grocery store or in your neighborhood or your church or kids going to the same school is pretty high. But the chance of actually ever engaging with the president of the United States is minuscule. It won't happen to most people in this country. And so that look you in the eye, tell you why we're fighting and sending and killing your children overseas, it doesn't have to happen at a personal level when Congress abdicates their authority.
Right. I love what you said in this 2021 Responsible Statecraft article. I think that many people forget that veterans usually lead the peace movements because they've seen for themselves that war is hell and should be avoided at all costs. What you write here is that any policy that prioritizes the demand of foreign populations over that of Americans cannot be described as intelligent. Worse, any policy that prioritizes endless war, overseas imperialism, and war profiteering cannot be described as moral. So which wars? You have a buffet to pick from right now that America is trying to get involved in. So if you're going to this buffet, I don't know, Ukraine, Somalia, Syria, Israel, now Libya, which one do you think concerns you the most right now that will escalate into costing American lives?
Israel. Israel and China are probably the two biggest wars right now that are the most terrifying. Ukraine is an interesting case study because we're fighting a war there. We're just doing it through proxy. We're sending all of our weapons, all of our money, all of our support to a country that I just saw that they were going to conscribe another 500,000 16 to 21-year-old Ukrainians to go die on the fronts against the Russian army. They're forcing a generation of Ukrainians to die for a cause that can't be won. We could send them all of our military arsenal. And they have no training. You can't just give a weapon to a 16-year-old inexperienced soldier and have them expect to be effective with it. So Ukraine's an interesting case study. It's one that we shouldn't be involved in. We've pushed that war. We've caused it with our expansion of NATO. And we need to get away from that kind of global expansionism. But the Israel conflict, or the war, let's call it what it is. Let's call it a spade. The war with Hamas is terrifying just because of how deep the divide is between the sides, between Israel and Hamas. And then the Chinese conflict with Taiwan is so terrifying just because of the size of China and the economic power. And I don't think we even know where they're at economically. I don't think we have a really good estimation. But any of those three wars, or even Lebanon, or Iraq, or Djibouti, Africa, or anywhere else, if it's important enough for us to send treasure and blood, then it should be important enough for Congress to debate it thoughtfully, aggressively, and put their name on the line and declare it. If we're going to go to war and it's so important, let's do it the right way. Let's go with a clear path, a definition of victory, and a plan to come home.
Right. And we saw, when Representative Jamal Bowman was asked about the Donbass region, he didn't even know where that was. So he's not studying the wars that he is elected to represent. So something like this would mean that they would have to do some homework, just a little bit. And that is upsetting. I want to ask you about this because the lack of war declaration hurts the troops for many years to come. Now, a few years ago, I read a book called Social Security, Medicare, and Government Pensions not a page turner, but I learned that when veterans ask for compensation for Social Security and service-connected disability, rather, the rules are more lenient if they served during active war declared times. So I'm putting this on the screen here. We see the times that they have done it just within the last 100 years. We have World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Persian Gulf War was the last time we got a formal declaration of war. So that means that anyone who's fought in, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Ukraine, if we do have boots on the ground, I believe, they don't fight under formally declared wars. So it won't be quite as easy for them to be cared for in their retirement. Is that right? So is that one of the many ways that we're sort of doing these people a disservice?
Yeah, there's a couple distinctions there, and they are distinctions with a difference. The periods of time that you're talking about are periods that the VA has determined are worthy of special compensation and benefits packages. We have to be real careful when we use the word declared war, because we actually haven't declared war since 1942. The end of World War II against Algeria, Romania, and Bulgaria. That was the last time we actually declared war. So those specific periods you're talking about are special compensation periods that the VA and the Veterans Administration has put aside for special injuries, the burn pits in Iraq, for example. That's why the Iraq period is eligible. But
yes, Agent Orange, my stepfather was exposed to that, and we know how the government fought back against any compensation for that.
Yep, absolutely. And we're seeing it right now with the global war on terror. The Veterans Administration just helped settle maybe the largest class action settlement for veterans in the history of the United States with the 3M dual flange hearing protection lawsuit, where veterans that were using these earplugs in combat that were supposed to protect our hearing, we all came home with tinnitus, and we've lost our hearing, and we finally settled this massive lawsuit. And I just got notified the other day that for all my tinnitus for the rest of my life and my hearing loss, which is about 40%, I'm going to get a check for about $4,000 one time. And you multiply that times the millions of people that have suffered during the global war on terror with this faulty equipment, and you see that it's not the government doing it; they're actually going after 3M, the manufacturer of the earplugs. But veterans do get taken care of. If you are injured in combat, whether it's been a declared war or not, this is one thing about the VA: they don't make a distinction. If you are service connected with your disability and it was done during a combat deployment or a foreign deployment, it is easier to get the benefits that you've earned.
Okay. All right. The distinction for the page of this book that I sent to you said that it is easier, even if the injury or illness was completely unrelated to military duties, if you were serving in one of these declared time periods. So I was just wondering if anyone who've served not in one of these time periods would be harmed, even though they're putting their lives at risk just as much as
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I can tell you, when I came home from Afghanistan in 2007, and there were no services available. PTSD was still not quite understood. The VA regional medical centers weren't ready for the influx of veterans that were coming home. And had there been a thoughtful debate and a declaration and an argument, an agreement on what victory looks like, we wouldn't have been there for 21 years. And so there wouldn't be millions of veterans coming home from the global war on terror. There would be a few dozen thousand, right? There might be 70, 80,000 that came home. So we've overwhelmed the system. And now we're seeing how much money they're pouring into the VA system. And we saw the VA problems that they had in Phoenix, where veterans were dying waiting for services when they came home from the war. Sending millions and millions and millions of people to occupy Afghanistan and not fight for 20 years created a flood on the system that's untenable.
Right. And if you study the history of PTSD, that was specifically to diagnose veterans who felt like what they had seen was pointless. It's because they couldn't see why they had done that, why they had seen such horror, and they couldn't reconcile it with their real life. So the idea of a pointless war has this lasting effect on people who survive them. And so if we continue to wage pointless wars, we prolong this symptom, right?
Yeah, in the first 10 years of the war in Afghanistan, I was there in 2005, 6, and 7, which is really, really early in the war, which is kind of a weird thing to say, early in the war. But I was there, and we saw the strategy change. Every time a new general or a commander took over CENTCOM, the strategy would change. It went from shock and awe to winning the hearts and minds, to insurgency, to counterinsurgency, to projects, to the provincial reconstruction teams. And then eventually, right before we left, we were helping build water treatment facilities in schools that the next day or the next deployment coming in was destroying those same schools because they'd been taken over by the Taliban. And so an overwhelming majority of veterans that served there, and it was in the high 60% range, said that the war wasn't worth it because we didn't understand. And we should have been home in February of 2002. We landed on October 7th of 2001, 10/7. It's a day that'll live in infamy when the first American boots hit the ground. The mission was accomplished. Everything had been done by February of 2002. But George Bush took his eye off the prize. Him and Dick Cheney wanted that war in Iraq so bad that they left us, they abandoned us for 2 decades in Afghanistan to go fight another war.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. And we can support this movement at bringourtroopshome.us, right? And is there anywhere else
correct.
you'd like to direct our attention?
Yep. So bringourtroopshome.us is our organization's website. Defendtheguard.us is if you want to find out specifically about the legislation. And if you go to defendtheguard.us, you can track each state. New Hampshire, we passed the House. Arizona, last year, we passed the Senate. In Texas, we are going to be on the ballot on March 5th for Republican voters to express their support for Defend the Guard during the presidential primary. And so if you click on the state you live in, you'll find your bill sponsor, and you can sign up to join the Army.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for this. I really support what you're doing, and I appreciate that. Please come back on Redacted as you bring this movement forward.
You bet. Thanks for having me on.
That's going to do it for Redacted today. Thank you so much for watching. We will be back tomorrow at the same time. We stream live at 4 p.m. Eastern every day. So, hey, please like and subscribe to this video. Please join the newsletter at redacted.inc. You can study up for the show. You can find more news that you like, or maybe news that you don't like. And it's a totally free newsletter. So please sign up at redacted.inc. We appreciate you being here today. Let us know what you think of the show in the comments, and we'll see you here tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody.